But there's this whole other system in our brain that we need to also give attention to called the appetitive or approach system. And this system needs to be fortified. We actually have to put effort into keeping this strong alive. And that takes anticipating with excitement, new things, new experiences. It takes learning to really be mindful and savor and bathe in the goodness of experiences when they're happening. And then intentionally reflecting back with gratitude and appreciation on the nice experience we had. And so if we can learn to do that, that can build that system so we're more likely to approach the next time.
Welcome to the Outlier Mindset Podcast, your guide for living a life by design. Here, we explore the journey of becoming an outlier, finding your purpose, mastering your mindset, optimizing your health, achieving financial freedom, and building a life centered around your passions. So tune in, transform, and thrive. Welcome to the Outlier Mindset. Let the journey begin. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Outlier Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Lesley, and today we welcome to the show Dr. Trevor Peterson, a distinguished professor of psychology at Oregon Tech and a licensed clinical psychologist. Trevor has dedicated over 2 decades to exploring how humans can forge deep connections and flourish, alongside teaching a wide range of courses and directing significant programs aimed at building relationships and enhancing well-being. He's authored Overlap, The Heart of Happiness, a book encapsulating his research on achieving joy, meaning, and life satisfaction. Trevor, welcome to the show. I can't wait to hear your take on finding happiness.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I've been looking into this for about 2 decades now. Kind of started out as a shy, introverted kid who was struggling to connect with others and felt a bit miserable at times. And wanted to kind of get into what allows us to find greater joy and meaning and life satisfaction. So I kind of started a formal search, studied psychology, went into clinical psych, started studying positive psychology, and really what it came down to at the end was, I came across so many different theories and happiness exercises, but I wanted to figure out, okay, what's the common denominator? If you could distill it all down, what's the underlying mechanism by which happiness can actually be created, so that there would be a more simplified, useful approach. And what kind of surfaced was this concept of overlap. And it's kind of a term I'm using to describe, the highest level of engagement with life. And if it's all right, I'll share a quick analogy and then we can kind of explain the ramifications of it. But so one way to think about this is if you are going to a beach, let's say a tropical beach, there's really 4 kind of ways you could engage with that. First would be what I would call passing. So this is cars on the freeway speeding by. They're not even realizing there's a beach there and they're missing it, right? It's non-engagement. Level 2 could be if you actually park the car and get out and you sit on the beach and you watch what's going on. So you see people playing and having fun, but you're still spectating, right? You're not in the mix yet, right? You're sitting in the bleachers. You're not in the game. So there's more joy and meaning, but you're not quite there. The third level of engagement would be what we could call wading. And this is where you get up and you start walking in the shallows of the water. You get your feet wet up to your ankles. You're starting to connect with some of life and vitality, but superficially, you're just kind of dabbling. And then the fourth level is what I call overlap. And this is where you kind of plan, you get the snorkeling gear on, you swim out there into the ocean, you dive down, and you experience, right, this whole new world of wonder and awe that's found in all the reefs teeming with plant and animal life under the surface. You commit, you go down, you connect, you learn, you give, you receive. There's a synergistic experience that happens as you explore this new world and form relationships, and you're changed, right? There's energy and change that happens there. And so that seems to be at the heart of happiness. When we have more overlap in our lives, when we identify the most living things in our lives, people, pets, nature, wisdom from books, and we deeply connect with it and commune, there's just a ton of psychological needs that are satisfied in those moments. And we experience joy, which is a signal that we're meeting our needs. We have greater meaning and substance in our life. It's enriched. And overall, we're just more satisfied with a life that's full of that kind of richness. So that's kind of the little epiphany that I've had across the last 20 years trying to summarize all the research. And I think it's kind of a simple way to approach life in each day even.
Where do you think most people are living at, Trevor? I mean, it seems to me like, a lot of us are so busy. We're go, go, go. We're always looking forward. We're always moving on to the next thing. And sometimes we forget about what's happening right now. Do most people live in that place where you're driving by the beach and just kind of giving a wave and moving on?
I think there's a strong tendency for us to stay at those lower levels of engagement for so many reasons. I wrote this book, Overlap, The Heart of Happiness, and, I talk quite a bit about these overlap dragons. And in medieval lore, the overlap dragons were what blocked the cave of, vitality or treasure. And there's a lot of things in our society in this day and age that can block our opportunities for overlap. And, sometimes, it's just being too busy, being distracted. We have so many devices that can capture our attention that are really non-living devices. They keep us away from more living things like our own kids sometimes, or our neighbor or a colleague. Depletion. If we're too busy, we can get tired, and then we can get depressed. Anxiety can get in the way of overlapping. Just on and on. There's just so many things, anger, hate, all these things can there's a point where we can just circle off a whole branch of the world and say, I don't interact with those people because they're the out group, and that can block opportunities to overlap with them. So the list goes on and on, but yeah, I think it's a real challenge, especially, with some of these newfound devices and distractions like cell phones. I mean, people spend hours and hours on their cell phone every day, especially teenagers. They say 9 hours sometimes on these devices. And so if we're looking at a device, we may not be interacting with something we're living, like a friend or a family member or a pet or nature outside. And that's what the research shows, is people are indoors more, they're away from people more. And that's creating kind of this epidemic of increased social anxiety, increased depression, feeling disconnected, feeling lonely, high rates of loneliness. And it's really not good for our mental health, and definitely not for thriving.
And it seems to me too, like you've been studying this for 20 years, and there has had to be an evolution of this too, because what 20 years ago looked like compared to what it looks like now with technology and all the things that we're competing for. We're in this scroll world now where you're going in and you're on TikTok and all you're doing is scrolling, or you're on Instagram, you scroll and you scroll and you scroll. Our attention spans are so limited and so small these days that we're always moving on to the next thing so quickly. And we're not taking that time, I feel like, in life just to stop, enjoy, live, and love. And I don't want to date myself, but I grew up before the internet. I grew up before we had cell phones, especially ones that we could carry in our pocket and be connected to everything in the world, right? And so it's amazing to me now to watch how people are reacting to technology and how it's taking us almost out of life. You would think that all this information and all these wonderful things are great because we've got so much knowledge and so much information and so much coming in. But at the same time, we're starting to forget about all these simple, incredible things that lie in front of us every single day.
You're exactly right. It's, the convenience of technology can start to separate us from each other, from living things, and it can take a big toll on our mental health. I spent some time in Kenya, in a Maasai village, and these little huts made out of mud and sticks are in a circle, and all the kids are out in the middle playing together, and people are coming in from herding their cattle, and they're talking, and the women all go together to get water. And there's some depravity there, and there's a lot of poverty and major challenges that can be dealt with. But there was a really strong sense of community. There was a lot of connection going on, a lot of friendship. And so sometimes in what we think is our development towards greater wealth and independence and our nice big houses apart from each other, we can lose some of the very things that seem to be fundamental to happiness. And that's people, community, connection.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just talked to another gentleman not too long ago about connection. And we were talking about how we got into that COVID era, and then all of a sudden everybody was cooped up and we couldn't see each other. We couldn't be in community. We could not be in network events or together physically. And then when we came out of that, people didn't go back to the office. All of a sudden we're at home. We're not going to networking events. We're not going to association groups. We're not doing those things anymore. And yeah, we are going into our phones. Yeah, we're going into our computers. But I feel like that's really not helping us at all. And then our children are seeing that. Our children are seeing that react that way, or to not be going out and meeting with people, and they're mimicking us. They're saying, well, this must be the way it is. How do you start to break out of those cycles and start to get back into the good cycle of getting back with people and getting together? Because I miss it. I mean, like at times, and I'm guilty as everybody else, like I like working from home, but man, I miss getting into those rooms. So what do we need to do to start breaking out of those cycles?
Great question. it becomes convenient. And once we create this new comfort zone, it's really easy to stay inside that. And I think there are these alarms that go off in our brain and body when we step outside that comfort zone, because that causes us stress. And, our brain wants us to stay within a nice state of equilibrium and balance. And so it kind of often will pull us back, say, whoa, that's stressful. Come back to what you're used to. It's comfortable. And so we have to, I think, change our relationship with that, to stress, or what we could call anxiety, even social anxiety, that it's not a bad thing. It's a really good signal that we're stepping out of our comfort zone, which at some point is no longer comfortable. It's very restrictive. It could be even miserable inside our comfort zone when we get extremely lonely in there. And we have to change our relationship where that's an exciting, that's a good thing. We want to feel that signal every day, that little bit of angst, like I am stepping into the new, I am moving towards a relationship. I'm moving into expanding my life, expanding, increasing richness. I don't know if this is actually on social media, but remember this portrayal of like a little circle, which is our comfort zone. And then way over here is a bigger circle where they said where the magic happens. And it's far outside our comfort zone. And there's all this like risk we have to take to get there. But it's really true. If we can see it that way and embrace and appreciate that little bit of signal that we're leaving our comfort zone, then that can motivate us instead of pulling us back. And there's just so much to gain. I mean, like you're saying, they do studies on media richness, and they find that, like a text is very low on richness. A phone call is a little more because you can hear their voice. And, a video call like this is even better because you can see the nonverbals. But then in person, there's even an added element. You can see the whole body. You can give a hug, you can cry on the shoulder if you need to. It's a whole different experience. And so thinking about that too, like, is this the appropriate level of richness that I need to even have this conversation? Should I be having this conversation about canceling or, like ending a relationship through text, or should this be an in-person thing? I think sometimes we're using the wrong level of richness, and then we're missing a lot of the information we need to connect.
Well, do you think people are generally happier now than they used to be? Or do you think that there's a decline in happiness since you've been doing your research?
Yeah, if we look at the US, it's in some ways dropping off, like, increased rates of anxiety, increased rates of depression, in some age groups, increased rates of suicide. I just saw something where I think the US dropped off the top 20 countries in their overall levels of happiness, as far as how that's studied. So in the US, we're struggling with that a bit. We are lonelier, more disconnected than maybe ever before. And some of that was COVID, but some of it's just the conveniences now. I mean, you can order your groceries online and go pick them up and hardly interact with the soul. You can get pizza from the pizza portal and not have to talk to anyone. People could literally go days and days without having to interact with a single person. And why that's less stressful and convenient, it's really, harmful for our mental health, when one of our deepest seated psychological needs is for connection. We're highly social creatures, and without belonging and community, we suffer in very practical ways, but definitely in psychological ways.
Yeah. Well, it certainly feels like we're in I don't know, maybe a period of time right now, like I've never seen in my lifetime, in terms of just kind of the division in the country and a lot of stuff that's happening politically. And then you've got all these conflicts that are happening throughout the world. And there's just so much outside stimulus that's just stressing people out a lot. And, I see it in their eyes. There's people that I know that were always so happy and so excited in that. And now it's almost like the life has been sucked out of them a little bit. And it's a sad thing to see, but, it's one of those things where it's like, I think about the same thing you do. Is that because of the connection? Is it because all of a sudden people are feeling isolated or divided, and instead of really being together and starting to come together and be social and be with one another?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it seems like those two factors feed into each other. They like fuel each other. The more we're separated, the more we're likely to believe some of these exaggerated, maybe true at times, but often exaggerated or catastrophized stories in the news or in social media. The most provocative stuff that causes us anger or repulsion is often what gets our attention the most, and what we actually pass on to others, right? So there is this tendency, this algorithm in social media, where we're more likely to watch, to give attention to, and to pass on material that's, angering us. And without the contact with others to have a conversation about it, we don't get accurate feedback to know when some of that stuff is exaggerated, right? If we talk to a friend about it, if we maybe is from a different political party, and have a good lunch conversation about it, we may find that actually they're not so extreme as this social media post says, or they're much more reasonable than anticipated. So we need the connection, we need the conversation to be able to sort through some of this stuff and accurately see the world and not catastrophize and not create these in-groups and out-groups and create this polarization that really can scare us and create a lot of anxiety, which just, again, further worsens our mental health. Semi-related, I have a colleague right next door who's an archaeologist, and he spent some time in the Netherlands studying how cities are designed. And here in the US, we have a lot of cities where, everything's spread out. You have to have a car to get places. There's no central meeting place. But in Leiden, where he was living, they have a town square. And it's a big town square, and everyone comes to the town square. Everyone can mostly walk or ride their bikes to the town square. So at night, everyone's there, and they're, eating, they're having a drink, they're, having a little walk together. And it's just a place where the whole community can gather, be connected, talk, sort stuff out, talk through problems. And so some of this just by design in the US, I think part of our problem is we haven't designed cities with overlap or connection in mind. And it's really hard. It's hard to get in your car, drive 20 minutes across town, to go meet up with someone. It's easier to just stay home and watch a movie, in your basement than to, create these relationships. It takes almost more effort, because of the design.
Yeah. I grew up in small town Nebraska my whole life. And so, growing up there, you kind of knew who everybody was. You knew everybody. What did we do? Well, we got together, when Friday night basketball games happened, and when I was playing basketball, the whole community came together for that. And, or if it's a football game, or if it's whatever it might've been, whatever was happening in town, everybody came.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody was there. You knew everybody. It was this social event. But now I live right outside of Denver, and it's huge. Yeah. There are so many people, almost the opposite effect, where you would think, well, you've got all these people, there should be more social opportunities. But what happens is, like you said, sometimes it's just easier to watch that movie at home than to drive across town to go to it. Or maybe it's easier to get on a video conference and have a call versus going in and having coffee with somebody in the morning to catch up. And it's one of those things where, and maybe small towns change since I've been there too. Maybe they've gotten so digital, they're segregated and not together either. I don't know, but I think about the way that I grew up versus the way it is now. And, for me, I miss so much being in rooms with people.
Yeah.
And I know that other people have got to be feeling that some way. And the question would be, though, is that going to circle back? Is it going to cycle back in effect where we're going to say, enough's enough, I need this social interaction. And then all of a sudden we're going to go back out of the computer screens and back into these rooms together?
I hope so. And I think we've done this social experiment, and we're learning that the outcomes aren't all that we had hoped for, that it is having a big effect on our physical health, especially with, youth who are indoors more, not exercising, not out playing sports and, venturing in nature. I think we're definitely seeing it's leading to more loneliness. It's increasing anxiety, social anxiety, especially increasing depression. I mean, they've shown, tons of studies show, like, the more time we spend on Facebook, the more depressed we will become, right? Because we are spectating. We're watching other people live life. We're not actually engaging with them, creating a relationship with them, and getting all our psychological needs met through that relationship and that support. And so we think we're being social, but really we're missing some of the key ingredients, the key nutrients we need in relationships that come when we're together. Other things like business-wise, rapport and building trust, that doesn't necessarily come like during the meeting. That's usually business. You're getting through the agenda. When the relationships are formed, the trust is formed, and the cohesion is formed, is actually before and after the meeting. It's those little side conversations. And there's research supporting this, right? That happen in the hallway, or when you're just chatting before the meeting starts, where you check in on each other's lives, and you learn a little bit about each other, and you gain an appreciation. You value the person more because you see them as a person, not just, a business partner. And that really strengthens companies. And so I think as we learn more about the actual consequences of doing everything digitally, I hope we will. I hope we'll be wise enough to come back around and say, there's a lot missing. There's richness, and there's very practical benefits of in-person meetings when it's possible. And there's always going to be probably a place for some, digital, but it's not appearing to be the same.
I've done a lot of research and studying on purpose and living a purpose-driven life. And what I'm curious to ask you about, though, is the happiness factor. Now, they say that only 10% of people actually know what their purpose in life is, and 5% are living in alignment with the life they want to be living to their purpose, right? When you're doing your research and your studies, how often does that come up? How much does purpose impact happiness?
Yeah, I think, so there's so many definitions of happiness, but the way I would define it would be, regular joy. And, joy meaning that primary emotion that comes when we're fulfilling our physical and psychological needs. If we're lonely and we connect with someone, a good friend, joy comes to signal, hey, you met a need, do it again. Or if we're really hungry and we have a nice meal, joy comes to signal, hey, you met your need. So part of happiness, I would say, is joy. The other part is meaning, right? Would be purpose. Like, how do you find joy in life or satisfaction with life if you don't even know why you're waking up in the morning? So I think that's a critical element, that we have a reason for living. And that allows us, I think, to justify our suffering, right? Because life's hard, it's difficult. And so without having like a strong drive to do the difficult things in life, I think we're gonna miss out on, a lot of that. And then the third component would just be kind of the life satisfaction that comes with regular joy and with meaning. And going back to joy, I would say it's not that we have joy all the time, we're blissful. It's that we just have that signal coming. There's other signals that are just as important to a fulfilling life. And those are signals like sadness, or signals that indicate a deficit where we need to meet a need. It's almost like the signals on the dashboard of your car. We want all the signals. The signals that are saying we're getting great gas mileage, and the signals that are saying we have a flat tire. We need to listen to all those so we can address them to have a healthy life. And I think when we're healthy, that's when we ultimately have more wellness, and we would probably say we're happier, we're more content, the quality of our life is up. Even if there's a lot of hardships in it, there's enough richness that overall we're content with it.
Now, what kind of mindset do people need to get? I know that, mindset is so important in our happiness, the way that we think, the way that we perceive, the way that we bring in the world, the way that we put out into the world. And, when you're talking about mindset in general, if I'm really wanting to be happy, maybe I'm sitting there right now going, I'm just not happy, but I want to be happy. I really want to be happy. What kind of mindset do people need to put in place, or what kind of steps do they need to take to really start to seek out that happiness?
That's a huge component of it. Some of the happiness research says that it's our attitude and actions that contribute to 40% of our happiness. 50% is just genetics. So we just have kind of a range that we're going to operate in, but there's a lot of flexibility within that range. 10% is our situation in life. So actually our situation is not that much when you think about it. It's not really that we live in California or not, right? It's 40%. The part that we can control is our attitude and our actions. So the attitude, the mindset is so critical. And I'm a clinical psychologist, so when I see clients, that's often a part of their misery, right? Is how they're interpreting the world, the lenses through which they're seeing things. And if those lenses are really clouded or jaded, it doesn't matter if great things are happening in their life, they could see that in a dark way. It's also what we choose to focus on. So if we have an attitude where we only fixate on the problems in our life, you think of like a landscape painting and there's a dark corner in the bottom. If we just fixate on that 20% of bad, difficult, threatening stuff, we can start to believe that's 100% of our life. And then we can just feel like, well, our life's horrible. When in reality, that may just be a small portion. And there's this other 80%, and if it's a landscape, of a sun and beautiful mountain peaks and, crystal clear lake and gorgeous trees. So we have to pull back and have the mindset and perspective of, okay, there's much more going on here than just my challenges. And I need to spend some time dealing with those challenges. I need to accept the things I can control in the difficult corner, but I also need to appreciate all the rest. And then I can be more content with my life. I can't fixate too much. So that's another part of mindset. I would say another part of mindset is just our valuing of the living things in our life. It's really easy to get into a pattern of being busy and moving quickly where we just stop to value, the wonder all around us. We stop valuing our pet. We just walk past them. We don't even pet them or interact with them and realize all the wonderful talents and gifts and how unique they are. We start passing by our kids. We get home late and just go to bed and almost forget we even have kids, right? And we miss those wonderful interactions we could have, and fun conversations and witty things that could go on there. Our partner, right? Our neighbors, our colleagues, there's a point where we're not valuing what's around it. And if we're not valuing it, then we're not connecting with it. If we're not connecting with those living things, we're not receiving the gifts that they offer that deeply enrich our life. And so I think a big part of the mindset is I have to live my life at a pace that allows me to connect and absorb the goodness all around me. And I have to have the mindset that allows me to see the goodness, to, yes, not be naive and admit I've got challenges and things I got to work on, but also pull back enough every day to see the bigger picture and realize there is so much good and so much to be appreciative of. And that, that attitude of gratitude goes so far, in helping our happiness as well.
Sometimes we can aimlessly drift through our life, not really sure how to break the patterns and live the life that you've always dreamed of. I get it. I have been there, so caught up in chasing opportunities until I found myself in a life that felt foreign to me. It took me years to unwind the messy web to get back to what I've been put on this planet to do. And let me tell you this, purpose doesn't have to feel out of arm's reach. And I've designed a plan for you to do a little bit each day over the next 30 days in a challenge that I call the Outlier 30. It's specifically designed to help you find or create more clarity around your purpose. So if you're feeling lost and you want to finally turn things around and live that life that you were destined to create, sign up right now. It's free. You have absolutely nothing to lose and the whole world to gain. Visit gorodman.com/outlier30 today. So kind of slowing down a little bit. A lot of people, we go 100 miles an hour. I go 100 miles an hour. I'm sure you go 100 miles an hour. But at the same time, taking that step back every once in a while, taking some breaths, taking in what you've got, taking in the blessings that you've got in your home, the blessings that you have in your life, and then really just seeing them for what they are, or actually seeing them in general. Like you said, sometimes you're just walking past that dog, you're not even recognizing it because you're so singular in your focus on where you're going and what you're trying to get done. But it sounds to me like if you really get up and you really acknowledge those blessings, slow yourself down a little bit, you're not going to miss out on anything. You're not going to race past life, but you will miss out a lot on life if you're not looking as you're in your race.
So true. And I have this positive psychology class, which is kind of the science of happiness and well-being. And, we do assignments. And one of the students in the class was trying to talk to a stranger. And so there was a man that he would pass, sat on a bench near where he lived. And he decided, I'm going to slow down and I'm actually going to stop. I'm going to sit next to this guy and introduce myself and just get to know him a little bit. Right. And he said that, he passed by this man so many times, didn't think twice about him, just kind of a shadow on a bench, but he finally stopped and he said it was phenomenal, the stories this guy had. He'd been through all sorts of things. If I remember correctly, he'd been in wars, he'd had all these interesting jobs, been through different relationships. And he was just flooded with just so much vitality coming from this man who just was an old man on a bench. And that's kind of what we can get if we slow down and connect, just life starts to pour out of people. I had, simple experience, but I, had a busy day, wanted to go to bed. My kids were upstairs kind of making noise. And so, I had to go up and try to help them get to sleep. And I think my youngest daughter was 2.5, 3 at the time. So I had to kind of chase her down, carry her into the bathroom, put her on the counter to help brush her teeth. And I was a little bit frustrated, but for whatever reason, I did slow down. I took some deep breaths and, she started making funny noises. She didn't want to open her mouth. And I started laughing. And then I started making funny noises to get her to open her mouth. And she opened her mouth, and it was just this silly thing, but just slowing down enough, taking a few deep breaths, giving it a second, like we bonded, right? We had this special moment where we started giggling and laughing and trying to make each other laugh. And there was this kind of cool thing that happened. I was brushing her teeth, with the light coming down from the above. I was just close enough to her where I was looking in her face, and I looked in her eye, and there was this reflection, like I was in her eye. Like I could see myself in her eye because I was slowed down enough and I was close enough. And it was symbolically just like, oh my goodness, we're connecting now, we're overlapping, and this is a really beautiful thing. And we're enjoying each other's company, we're learning about each other, and this is joyful, right? This is where happiness is created. And I need to do this more. I need to slow down enough to have this moment, hopefully with each of my family members every day, not just every once in a while, but do I slow down at night when I put my kids to bed and read them a story and talk about the day and tell them why I love them and learn more about them, or do I just pass that by or just spectate at them getting to bed? There's so many opportunities for connection and to just receive so much vitality from life that are easy to pass by.
It's funny when you're talking about your kids, there's that age period with your kids where they don't want to have anything to do with you either. Yeah. They literally want to be like, I'm going to be like this. I don't want to look at my parents. I don't want to talk to them. They're just going through those phases of life. It's usually that kind of that middle school era where they're just, I don't know, it's almost like Satan has entered into their souls and you're like, but the thing about it is that people cycle back. So like my oldest daughter is getting ready to go to college. And now every night I might be laying in bed and she'll just come into my bedroom and she'll lay down next to me and, she'll talk to me or we'll talk through things. And we just have the most beautiful moments. But it's where she's at in her cycle too, in terms of now she knows she's getting ready to leave and she wants to spend these times with her father. And I'm telling you what, those connection times, there is nothing like it. I mean, being able to connect with somebody on that level is just a beautiful thing for everybody, for your soul.
Oh, it's so filling. I mean, it just nurtured, it fulfills those deep-seated psychological needs. And going along with what you're saying, my older sister at one point said, this is when I had younger kids. She's like, when your kids get older, when they become teenagers, just watch, they're not going to want to say a word to you. And then, 11 o'clock hits and suddenly they'll be as chatty as you could ever imagine. So she said, I've just learned that even though I'm tired, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, I just go sit on the couch with a book and I just wait, and they'll eventually come. They'll find me and they'll want to talk about all these things that they never would talk about earlier in the day. And so I think some of that attitude you're talking about, or mindset, is if we want to overlap and connect and have that joy, like we have to be a bit more flexible. If we're too rigid in our schedule, too fast paced, we're going to miss it. But if we can meet people where they're at, we can slow down and we can adapt. There's opportunities for connection that are all around us at work, at home, when we're on the weekends. So some of it's maybe just sacrificing a little bit to receive more.
Yeah. And I think, we talk about what's happening at home, you talk about your kids, and that's one thing, right? I mean, those are the people that are here every single day. But now go a deeper step and think about those connections outside of the home. Think about those people in business or friends or, people that are in your life that maybe, I don't know, maybe you're not going deep enough with. And I know that I'm guilty of that. I know that when COVID hit around, I used to go out with my friends like once a week, and whether it be just for some dinner or whatever it might be, we just don't do that anymore. We just don't go out and do those things like we used to do. And I'm really missing those types of deep connections. Those take even a little bit more work than maybe that family connection where you're sitting there across from your daughter and you can see the reflection in your eyeball, right?
Yeah.
Or in her eyes. So it's like, what do you do? What do people need to do to start reestablishing those connections? Is it just step one, just reaching out? Is it that simple?
Yeah, I think so. It could be, like reflecting back. How was it, before COVID? If it's changed, how was it? And did I enjoy it? Did I actually enjoy it better? Even if it now feels more stressful or like it's going to take more effort, was it worth it? And I think we quickly forget things, and we can go back to prior to and recapture some of, the excitement we had, some of the joy we felt, some of the bonds that were different then. And we might be able to garner that motivation to do it again. And then we can start small, maybe just one invite a week, just go to lunch, and then maybe it's go to dinner, but I think it takes putting ourselves back in those situations so we can get the feedback that it is worth it. We can remember that it was worth it, but we haven't done it for a while. It's hard to fully believe that it's worth that extra effort at night to after we've already been working all day and been gone, to go back out and go to dinner with someone. But you do it once or twice and it's like, oh yeah, totally worth it. It's worth doing this, a few times a month. And there's good research to support that too. I mean, there was one study that was kind of compelling that said being a part of a social group, even if it meets one time a month, contributed more to people's happiness than like a $10,000 raise. It's really substantial how much one meeting with a social group, it could be a book club, right? It could be going and playing sports with some friends. So even a little bit of additional social connection, really can go a long way.
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on too. And I don't want to go off too much on a tangent on this, but when you think about fear, and there are so many things that are happening in society, like, that are maybe like concert venues or big places where people have historically met, enjoyed music, enjoyed sports, enjoyed whatever it might be. But so many bad things are happening at these type of events now. And I believe that people have this fear in them. I know I do at times about, well, do I really want to go to that concert because there's going to be a lot of people, and what if something were to happen? Is this something that a lot of people feel? Maybe it's just me feeling this way, but I feel like there's always another reason to even stay out of those larger social settings just because of what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, beyond just, you could pick up something that's contagious. Yeah, there could be a mass shooting. And that's a tough one, right? I mean, that's a legitimate fear. One of the things when people are dealing with anxiety that can help, in therapy and could help anyone, is looking at probabilities. There's some studies that have shown that one of them found that like in a group of people that 85% of the things that they worried about happening never happen. So the vast majority of things, bad things we think were going to happen in our life, never materialize. And then of the 15% of things that did happen, 75% of the time, it wasn't nearly as bad as they expected, right? So in our minds, we can come up with so many horrible scenarios, but very, very few occur. And usually when they occur, we manage them just fine. And so, when you watch the news, they're cherry picking the worst of the worst. They're finding the most provocative thing that will get your attention, that will allow you to watch more of their ads, that will, enable them to make money, right? And so I think when we realize that the actual proportion of bad to good in the world is not what we see in the news, that's highly cherry picked, usually the most provocative stuff out there, that can help a little bit to say, okay, this is like so low probability. This is like less than getting hit by lightning, or, this is less than things that risks that I tolerate every single day. Then it's easier to do it. People who have a fear of flying, it's a little easier when they really look at, okay, this is actually way safer than driving a car. And I drive a car every day and I totally tolerate that risk. Totally comfortable with that. Why would I shy away from something that's actually, 5 times as safe, let's say. I'm just throwing that number out there. So that can help a little bit. But at some point we do have to grapple with that. Distress tolerance. To live, you have to take risks. Without taking risks, you stop living. And people could barricade themselves in their house and actually start to die very quickly. Right? That's very unhealthy, to not exercise, to not be social, to be in the dark. And so at some point we have to take risks to live, to extend. It's just an integral, essential part of life. And that, I think, can change our attitude about it a little bit. It's not about doing everything to avoid risk. It's about living a balanced life, which includes some of that.
Yeah. And I always try to talk to my kids about, kind of mitigating risk. Okay, so there's risks in everything we do, but just to make sure that we have this awareness when we're going into these situations. But the thing that I worry about is, like, when you're talking about happiness, the analogy you gave earlier about the guy who's either A, driving past the beach, or B, he's snorkeling, he's going down, he's checking it all out, right? And I feel like fear often keeps people in that car too as they're driving past the beach. So how do people start to address that and go, you know what, I need to start getting out of the car. I need to start actually going and living more. What are the first steps that they need to do to really just be able to go, you know what, no more. I'm going to get rid of this and I'm going to move forward and I'm going to find my own happiness and I'm going to start getting out of the car and getting in the water.
I think, some of this is, I think of it like one of those water pumps, like in the Western movies, the old ones, where you go up to it, you crank it, nothing happens, and you're like, there's nothing here for me. But if you stick with it, if you crank that thing a few more times, even though it's taking a lot of effort initially, you can finally prime the pump and then the water flows naturally and then it's not so effortful. So I think some of it's just realizing to start any new habit, any new behavior, it just takes a lot of activation energy. It can take a lot of effort. And so you have to just kind of force yourself initially. You have to be mindful enough to consult your values and say, I value this enough. It is worth it. I believe that there'll be joy and meaning and enrichment in my life for doing this, even though it's outside my comfort zone, even though it's a little bit risky, but it's worth it. I'm going to push myself to do this. And then I'm going to look at the actual feedback. Was it worth it? Did I gain? And if you can do that a few times, I think the momentum builds, the excitement builds, like, ooh, that was great. It was fine. Wasn't nearly as stressful. There's something else called the anxiety curve that as we, approach and stick with something anxiety provoking or new, our anxiety goes up, but eventually we'll always peak. And if we stick with it, it'll always come back down. And so sometimes when our anxiety is going up, we pull away and avoid and pass, and then we get all that relief from avoiding, and then we're more likely to avoid again. That's negative reinforcement. The stressful things pulled away, and then we're like, oh, I'll just avoid again because that felt really nice to not have to deal with that. But if we can push through and get over that anxiety curve and come back down, then we get the relief from actually sticking with it. And we learn 2 things. We learned that, hey, it wasn't as bad as I thought. And 2, or it was great. And 2, I was able to deal with it. I kind of wasn't sure if I could deal with it because I haven't done this for a long time. For 2 years of COVID, I didn't really talk to them, but, I actually was able to have a great conversation at dinner. I was totally capable, or sufficiently capable. And then when you get that new learning or new feedback, it's so much easier to do it the next time. To put yourself in that new situation or that little bit risky situation, because you have that evidence now that, hey, it's usually not as bad. I'm able to deal with it. And I get a lot of reward out of it. So let me try that again. So I don't know if that helps, but one more thing, there's this whole new treatment actually that's kind of acknowledging kind of your concerns here, and it's called positive affect treatment. And what it identifies is that we have these 2 systems in the brain. One is our defense system, which is trying to defend us from threats and danger. And that can get really fortified when we've been through difficult situations like COVID and we've heard about dangerous things. We can really build that capacity to be on high alert for risk, and we have all these alarms going on, and that can really pull us away from, connecting, engaging, just pull back away from anything that's dangerous. But if that system in our brain is too fortified, it can totally paralyze our life. It can just pull us away. We can just start to avoid where we're not doing anything anymore. But there's this whole other system in our brain that we need to also give attention to called the appetitive or approach system. And this system needs to be fortified. We actually have to put effort into keeping this one strong and alive. And that takes anticipating with excitement, new things, new experiences. It takes learning to really be mindful and savor and bathe in the goodness of experiences when they're happening. And then intentionally reflecting back with gratitude and appreciation on the nice experience we had. And so if we can learn to do that, like really identify neat opportunities that are coming with a friend or family member or nature, get excited about it, keep that motivation enough to actually go do it. And then in the moment, really slow down and absorb and enjoy just the totality of the gifts being offered there. And then intentionally look back and remember and journal or look at pictures or talk to people about the good experience. That can build that system so we're more likely to approach the next time. And, that we're more likely to go after the things that will build our lives.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I know that I like to personally practice gratitude a lot, where I will actually take the time and do some meditation, sit back, and then just practice enjoying and reflecting on the incredible things that have come into my life or that are happening in my life or that are going to happen in my life, just having this sense of gratitude. And that also gets me happy. It makes me want to get into that next thing or go to that next thing. Because I feel like a lot of people are held back by a couple things. People, number one, they don't like change. So once you start to get a routine and get into a cycle, it's really hard. Like you said, you go up and up and up, and then you're like, fail, you want to get out of it. Or the other thing is just that fear factor of, I'm afraid I'm going to fail. I'm afraid I'm not going to like it. I'm afraid that I'm not going to be good at it. There's those fears. And fear, like you said, it's usually a liar. I mean, most of the time, the stuff that fear is telling you is just not true. I've got them, though. You've got them. We've all got them. And they constantly control our brains. But once you can start to practice gratitude, once you can start to say, I'm going to push through the fears, once you can start to say, I'm not going to let this part of my brain dictate to me, this fear part of my brain dictate to me what I'm going to look like today or how I'm going to show up in the world, I think you can really start to change your paradigm, how you see things, and then how you put yourself into the world.
Yeah. So very, very wise. One way I like to think about it is it's like you're the CEO sitting at a conference table and in comes all these employees. Some of these employees are thoughts, one may be or emotions. So fear could show up and share his, kind of like your safety officer, talk about all the risks that could happen to you today. So we have all these emotions and thoughts that are coming and presenting their messages about what they think should happen today. But the wonderful thing is that we're the CEO of our lives. And a good CEO doesn't just do whatever his employees say, especially if they're really radical, exaggerated, catastrophic, if what they say isn't evidence-based, right? They wouldn't just go with whatever that loudest employee says that day, even if it is fear, right? They would consult their company's mission statement, vision statement, look at their values, and use that to guide the day, with all the rest of the context that's come in. So you're not going to be naive and not pretend like you may have to adjust things a little bit based on risk factors or whatever, but ultimately it's the values that guide the day. And that's, I think, where we find freedom is I don't just listen to fear. I don't just listen to anxiety or my inhibitions. Like I look at my deep-seated values and I do what I have to do to honor those, even if it means doing some things that are difficult or that are actually stressful or that are uncomfortable, because that's when I can live with integrity. That's when I'm going to feel really satisfied with my life, when I'm going to really accomplish the things that matter to me. I'm going to have the relationships that matter to me. And it's kind of like you're standing before a cold stream or a cold river, or we'll call it a stream, I guess. And, sometimes we want to wait till that stream stops flowing or it gets warm, but usually we'll be waiting forever if we do that. At some point we have to just say, I value something on the other side of the stream. And so I'm going to walk across this cold stream anyway, and I can, and I'll live through it, and it'll be worth it once I get there. I think that's just kind of an acceptance we have to make in life at some point. It's probably not going to get easy until we start doing it. And then it gets easy. We have to kind of earn that it gets easier as we start to get that momentum rolling.
Well, I'll ask you another question then. And just because you're on the stream and river topic here, I'm always talking about the river and growing up again in Nebraska, we used to always go fishing in this river called the Platte River. And you do a lot of wading, and it'd be, maybe between your chest and your waist high. and you'd be walking upstream, and then all of a sudden you'd get a little bit of an undercurrent and it would sweep you back downstream a little bit, and then you'd walk back up, and then you sweep you back down a little bit. I've always felt like life is like that. You can be going upstream and you can be working hard, you can be doing great, and then all of a sudden an undercurrent comes and it takes you back a little bit. It sweeps you down. And, a lot of times people are like, why me? Or they don't look at it as being necessarily, and it might not be a positive thing, but it's one of those things where people say, why do I keep getting swept back? I really want to have gains. I really want to move forward in life. I really want to be happy, but then something happens to me and I'm swept downstream. What do you tell that person in terms of what are the best things to overcome that when you have that setback where you get swept downstream a little bit?
It's a tough one, right? Because that can really cause frustration, discouragement, and then disrupt our motivation. I think one way to see it is, if you do think of like maybe a mountain analogy, we can walk way, way up the mountain. And even when we slip, sometimes we're like, oh, I'm right back down to where I started. Rarely is that the case. Usually we're still way up the mountain. We're so much farther than where we started way down here, even though we slipped back down to here. And I think that's important to like rationally remember that. Like I am nowhere near. I worked with a client one time who had been off meth for like 9 months, and then she slipped, and she just thought she was right back where she started. And we had a good conversation. Like not at all, actually. She was back to here, but she had learned so much. She learned all these skills. She connected all these resources. She had so much more ability and knowledge to tackle it again, right? She was not in that naive place where she started. And so that helped her regain the motivation, energy to get back at it, to continue to honor her values. So I think that's important. And another thing is, kind of separating, not thinking in black and whites, looking at the nuance and maybe just adjusting how we measure success. If success is any day when I honor my values, even a little bit, if I, connect with someone, I learn something new, I develop myself, I contribute, whatever those values are, that is a good day, or at least a good portion of that day was good. And that's a win. And that win never goes away. Like that's a memory now. That's something that I will always have with me. I had that wonderful experience with my child or with my colleague or that advancement at work. And even if there's some setback in the future, that's a different thing to measure. This doesn't ever get taken away. And then it's just like collecting the good. And we have this basket full of just good experiences and memories that we always get to keep because they happened and they're our memory. And even if some bad things happen, that doesn't subtract, right, from the goodness of our life in this way. And I think keeping those maybe as separate tabs is helpful. It's not that one subtracts from the other, but they're just completely separate because we're always going to have some challenges, some difficulties, and those are real and we have to deal with them. But that doesn't mean this other stuff doesn't exist just as much.
So acknowledge the wins, acknowledge the progress. And even if you get set back a little bit, know where you came from. You are so much further ahead. I love that. Hey, Trevor, I want people to be able to find you. I want them to be able to find your book. Where do people need to go to connect with you and to find your book?
Yeah, so I've got a website. It's drtrevorpeterson.com. It's SEN for Peterson. I have some information there. And then the book is available on Amazon. It's called Overlap, The Art of Happiness, an evidence-based recipe for joy, meaning, and life satisfaction. So yeah, you could find it on Amazon. Those would be the two main ways. My contact information is on the website. So I'm happy to have discussions if you have questions or through email or phone or whatever. I'm pretty open in that way if people would like to kind of follow up on some of this discussion.
Yeah, perfect. And I always ask, this is the last question that I ask of the day, and ask this to everybody, but if you could go back in time and sit down with your younger self, and you could give yourself one piece of your most valuable advice that you have acquired over your lifetime, what would that one piece of advice be?
Excellent question. It's a deep one. I think what it would be is that quality relationships are the best predictor of physical health, mental health, and life satisfaction. And so they're probably the most valuable thing to invest in. I think it would be that.
Awesome. Trevor, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Rodman. It's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed the conversation.